Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I begin speaking to Bill C-45, I just would like to highlight for those who are watching today that the Liberals actually took the opportunity to move time allocation on this important bill. Now, what that means is that they, in essence, actually they cut down debate. They are actually refusing to hear from the members on the opposite side of the House today because they want to rush through and get to a vote. Now, why is it that they want to rush through and get to a vote? Well, because they have party preparations to put in place with regards to July 1st, 2018, which is unfortunate because it's actually degrading to our parliamentary process, which is that we would have the opportunity to debate, to enter into a robust debate with regards to the topic at hand on behalf of Canadians, which it is they who have elected us to be here representing them. That said, when I talk about C-45, the legalization of marijuana, I'm not talking about the legalization of marijuana for medical purposes. I'm not talking about the legalization of marijuana that in a way that is well-researched or thoughtful or has taken into account the different factors that need to be considered. I'm not talking about a bill that came out of a lengthy consultation process or a scientific endeavor. No, actually, I'm talking about a bill that was incredibly rushed in nature. It really did not take scientific evidence into consideration. It didn't take the insight of law enforcement agents or healthcare practitioners or experts into consideration. And really, all it does is it rushes through this piece of legislation at a rate that is unnecessary, and according to a date or a deadline that is arbitrary, and that is, of course, July 1st, 2018. Now, I've heard from many people who are very worried about this legislation, and many have spoken out at a national level, including Aboriginal leaders, law enforcement agents, health experts, municipalities, provinces, and, of course, concerned citizens from all across the country. And, Mr. Speaker, some of the things that they're saying is that they're concerned about children accessing marijuana easily, the age at which they are legally able to acquire it, education programs, lack thereof, timeline, the fact that it's very rushed and the cost that this is going to have to municipalities and to provinces, and the fact that they really don't feel that they've been given adequate time to respond. I'm hearing from law enforcement agents much the same, both the cost and the timeline, as well as drug-impaired driving they're bringing up. And then, of course, there's the issue around taxation. So in this time that I have, I would like to address some of these issues to a greater extent. When it comes to children, I believe that the government should take them very seriously. Their future. That's a part of what this place is about. There are 338 of us who have been elected to make decisions on behalf of Canadians from coast to coast. And yes, we make those decisions for today, but we have to be aware of how those decisions will impact those who are coming after us tomorrow. Unfortunately, this legislation is ill-drafted in terms of its legal age of access, and that is, of course, age 18. Now, if you were to talk to the Canadian Medical Association or the Canadian Pediatric Society or the College of Physicians here in Canada, they would all say to you that 18 is too young, that the human brain is actually developing until the age of 25, and that the use of marijuana actually impedes the full development of the human brain. And so they've actually called for the legal age to be 25, and then they said perhaps 21 would be a good negotiating point. That amendment was brought forward at the committee, and of course the Liberals shut that down. So I have to beg the question, of course, is this government acting responsibly in setting the age at 18? Now, this government also said that they would take the next generation seriously. They said that they're going to be the party that wants to hold marijuana out of the hands of young people, but by putting it at the age of 18 and allowing for plants in our houses at home, which I'll talk about momentarily, they're really not taking that seriously in terms of keeping it out of the hands of young people. Not only that, but I heard from a group of young people who I meet with on a monthly basis for them to advise me on different topics at hand. And we talked about the legalization of marijuana, and they said this to me. They said, if we legalize marijuana, which of course we're going down that road, and we do it according to the mechanisms that are at play here, without education, which there is none of right now, it will normalize it, and young people will think it is just okay, that there are no negative repercussions to the use of marijuana. And so the young people that I'm actually listening to, they're telling me that they're quite concerned. They're concerned for themselves, for their peers. They're actually very concerned for their younger siblings and what they might fall prey to, which I think that that's definitely worth considering. Now, I think a further point that we need to consider then related to child access is definitely education. Now, in their budget, the Liberals did promise a considerable amount to education. They said $9.6 million over 5 years. Now, in my estimation, that's not enough. I don't know that they're adequately going to be able to put forward an education campaign with that amount of money over 5 years. But nevertheless, it is money put aside. It is money that was promised to this cause. And they did commit to a robust, I'm using the Prime Minister's word, robust campaign with regards to educating young people. Now, to date, we see nothing. Nada. No action. Nothing, broken promise. And so we see them talking out of one side of their face saying education is very important and we want to keep it out of the hands of young people, but then out of the other side, they're actually not willing to move the dial and invest money in terms of getting an education program up and running, which of course means that we're actually setting young people up for experimentation and for the normalization of drug use among our children. I have yet another concern. This legislation allows for 4 plants to be in every household. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me amuse the House for just one moment. I did a little bit of research. Now, 1 plant equals 1.2 kilograms or 1,200 grams of marijuana. That's how much that'll produce. Now, if there's 0.66 grams in each joint on average, which is what my research told me, then 1 plant will actually produce 792 joints. But you're not allowed 1 plant, you're allowed 4 plants. So 4 plants will actually produce 3,168 joints. Now, 3,168 joints, and on average, people smoke about 3 joints a day, is what my research told me. And so actually, 4 plants in your household will produce 1,056 days worth of joints. Mr. Speaker, I ask the House, does that sound like a personal amount to you? Just curious, just curious. Now, that'll leave plenty to sell and plenty to use. And those plants will be right in a person's home. Now, I'm not the one that's speaking out on this on my own. Law enforcement agents are also very concerned about this, and they're begging the question, why do we have to allow 4 plants in a home when we're legalizing marijuana and people can go down the street and get it at a store? My next point, then, is with regards to law enforcement agents. Now, they came to the committee and they told us their concerns, and there are many of them. One, they're concerned about the deadline, July 1st. They're saying to us that they will not have their men and women in uniform trained to deal with this. They are saying that the wait list for training is super long and the cost is extravagant. Not only that, but actually agents have to be sent to the United States in order to access that training. So in essence then, what they said to the committee is they said they need more time, and they said that they need more than double the number of police officers who are certified to conduct roadside drug-impaired driving testing. Now, Mr. Speaker, this should concern us. It really should. I don't want to be on the road. I don't want my nieces on the road. I don't want my nephews on the road. I don't want my brothers on the road or my sisters on the road or my parents on the road or anyone else on the road when there are individuals out there who are going to be impaired, but it's normal. I'm not okay with that. And so we do need, again, that robust education program put in place so that people understand, but also we need law enforcement agents in place so that they can actually enforce the law. Those who came to the committee, the officers at committee, they also said that we can expect about a 6 to a 12-month gap in terms of the legislation coming into effect and people having access to marijuana legally, and then to the point where the police are actually caught up and able to enforce. So that's a 6 to 12-month gap. And they said, and I quote, that this will allow organized crime to flourish. So much for keeping organized crime down. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to and the House's attention to is the cost and the consequences that this will have on municipalities and provinces. We're talking about a cost for our law enforcement agents. We're talking about a cost with regards to putting policy in place. We're talking about insurance costs for private employers. We're talking about policy costs at that level as well. We're talking about costs with regards to just different legislative pieces that have to be put in place and all of the consultations and legal work that has to be done around that. And so, Mr. Speaker, all in all, the point that I wish to make today is that we are rushing through, the Liberals are rushing through this bill. Let me be very clear here. They are choosing to rush this legislation through based on an arbitrary deadline that carries absolutely no weight or essence in this House. They could stop it. They could halt it. They could adequately consult. And they could be responsible and listen to the experts that have spoken to this piece of legislation. Right now, this government is choosing to act irresponsibly. And I highlight the word choice. They are choosing to put inadequate legislation in place over this country.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's intervention this afternoon with respect to this particular legislation. I am concerned, though, Mr. Speaker. One thing that is very, very clear, and the facts support this, and she talked a lot about children and young people, is that currently 20% of young people, youth, are using marijuana. Over 20% of young Canadians are saying that they're using it. Currently, the strategy that we have is not working. She talked about investing in public education. $45 million over 5 years to be invested in public education. She talked about the fact that she hasn't seen any of this. In Ontario, Mr. Speaker, in my riding in Kingston, all summer long I'd been hearing ads on the radio that were promoting safe use of cannabis, anticipating the introduction of this legislation. So I would argue that she's wrong, Mr. Speaker, that the public education is already working, because we know that that's how we're going to successfully get through to young people so that we see a significant reduction in the amount of usage.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure that there was a question there, but so he said that there's over $20 million available to public education. Oh, 45, sorry. So I'd actually love to see those documents tabled if he wouldn't mind, because if those are federal dollars, I'd like to know how he's accessing them outside of what's stated in the budget, because I believe that our responsibility is to hold this government to account with regards to the budget, and the budget does not give that number. So if they're somehow eliciting funds through some backdoor channel in order to get education to his riding, as he highlighted, it is going to his riding, obviously the kids in his riding matter more than the rest of Canada, then we should be aware of those funds. Seems appropriate, doesn't it? Now, with regards to 20% that are using, no, I'm not done. With regards to the 20% of young people that are using, so basically we're saying, hey, 20% are using it, so let's just legalize it so that we can facilitate 100% using. Okay, well, guess what? People misuse guns all the time. Maybe the appropriate way to handle that then is just take away any prohibition.
Good question.